Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to yet another enriching session of Creative Weekend Talk of episode 161. I am your host Supriya Naika and I am delighted to have you all gathered today. Creative is more than just a group, it's a community of curious mind united by our passion for knowledge. Our tagline, Knowledge Square, sharing knowledge increases our knowledge. Our mission to inspire and empower each other through the exchange of ideas. Our vision is to cultivate constructive thinking on various domains by focusing on topic behind textbooks, academics and syllabus. As a part of this initiative, we invite subject experts every Saturday to share their insight and expertise, bringing a wealth of knowledge to our platform. Today's session is on Rocket Miles of India. To present this, we have Mr. Ramu sir with us. Ramu sir is a distinguished expert in the field and we look forward to gaining valuable insight from his talk. We also want to remind you that Creative organize continuous talks and live stream this program on our YouTube channel Creative GBD. Make sure to stay connected with us for more uh, such more sessions. I welcome Ramu sir and I call Uma Devi, Creative Volunteer, to introduce today's speaker. Over to Uma.
Thank you, ma'am. A very good afternoon to everyone present here with warm greetings. It is indeed a great pleasure to extend a warm welcome on behalf of a creative team conducting wonderful webinar on Rocket Miles of India by a resource person, Mr. Ramu Machapalli Srinivas sir. Ramu sir, by profession for last 25 years, has worked with various multinationals as HR and admin professional, including Ericsson, Tata, BP Solar, and Tata Teleservices, to name a few, and took a career break during 2021 to pursue his passion. He is a passionate stamp collector for close to 4 decades. He has participated in several state, national, and international philatelic exhibitions. He has traveled to various countries and India extensively in love of philately. He has conducted several workshops, guest lectures on various topics in philately. He is a life member of Karnataka Philatelic Society, Philatelic Congress of India, Royal Philatelic Society, London. Includes 1854 stamps of India, bisected stamps of India used strides, settlements 1854 to 1860, 1948 Gandhi service stamps, paper archiving and philately, rocket miles of India 1934 to 1939, first aerial post of the world 1911, Mysuru Anche, a territorial postal system. Our ecstatic and enthusiastic guest has been awarded with Gold Plus Jury Special Prize, Aeropex 2019, Large Vermeil Stockholmia 2019, Stockholm, Vermeil at London 2022. Conferred with Fellow at Royal Philatelic Society, London in 2019 and Fellow of Philatelic Congress of India 2021. In addition to this, he is a bibliographer who collects a first edition of books related to Mysore and Kannada and houses a library containing close to 3,000 books and magazines at home. His other collections include stamps on space, minerals, fossils, herpetology, entomology, and ornithology. His birds stamps collections is one of the largest collections in India, which is close to 15K different stamps on birds across the world. Cheers to you, sir, and once again welcome you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Elrigu namaskara.
Thank you,
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Over to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Elrigu namaskara. Today, I'm going to present you with a ecstatic subject called Rocket Mails of India. I'm just going to share the screen now. Rocket Mails of India. In this presentation, you will come to know what is philately, the world's first stamp and the man behind the world's first stamp, the world's first stamp collector, British India's first stamp, the world's first aerial post, the rocket mail concept, and Indian rocket mails. This whole presentation I have developed in such a way that it goes with the Benjamin Franklin quote, wherein he tells, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn." Throughout the presentation, I hope I'll make you involved in the entire presentation. And now we are going to go through the detailed presentation. This whole presentation will take about 25 to 30 minutes. Post that, we can take forward the question and answer session. What is philately? Basically, all stamp collecting is not philately or philatelist. Okay, the philately is basically the study of stamps and postal history and other postal related items is called as philately. A philatelist does not have to collect stamps. Many casual stamp collectors accumulate stamps for sheer enjoyment and relaxation without worrying about the tiny details. Tiny details in the sense, for example, I have made a small presentation on 1854, for which my fellowship was awarded during 2019, which talks about the fly speck details about the particular stamp printed and the errors and the flaws in it, all that. And the creation of large or comprehensive collection, however, requires philatelic knowledge. Philately knowledge is nothing but the more you study about that particular subject, you gain through various books. And this is the world's first stamp. World's first stamp, the penny black, was the world's first adhesive postage stamp used in public postal system. This was introduced on 1st May 1840, but to the public on 6th May 1840 of that year, which houses a small portrait of young Victoria. Why it is called penny black is only because the value of the stamp is 1 penny and the color of the stamp is black. That's why it's known as penny black. Even though this was in use for a very small period, as it, 1 minute. The penny block was in use for a little over a year. The stamps were printed in unperforated sheets. Unperforated sheets means there was no perforation to tear the stamps. They used to use scissors to cut the stamps. And later on, when the new series of stamps were introduced, those were with perforations, then this penny black was discontinued. Before stamps were introduced, there used to be a postal system called prepaid postal system, wherein the writer of the letter used to address it to a particular person, and after that mailman takes that letter to the addressee used to read the content, and he used to refuse to accept the letter because he has to pay money for that particular stamp. And this was a big loss to the exchequer, to the treasury. So this was observed by an English teacher called Rowland Hill. He studied the entire postal system. Then in 1839, he proposes a postal reform, which resulted in the first stamp of the world, which is called as penny black. You can see the image of the Rowland Hill. He was born on 3rd December 1795, and he was there till 27th August 1879, was an English teacher, inventor, and a social reformer. He campaigned for a comprehensive reform of the postal system based on the concept of penny postage, and his solution of prepayment facilitating the safe, speedy, and cheap transfer of letters. Hill later served as a government postal official, and he is usually credited with originating the basic concepts of modern postal service, including the invention of postage stamp. So he is the Pitama of stamps. And then what is stamp collection? How it all started? Postage stamp collecting began at the same time that stamps were first introduced by the country. And by 1860, thousands of collectors and stamp dealers were appearing around the world as this new study and hobby spread across Europe, European colonies, and the United States and parts of the world. People started to collect stamps almost immediately. One of the earliest and most notable was John Edward Gray, who is seen in the picture. In 1862, Gray started that he began to collect postage stamps shortly after the system was established and before it had become a rage. This particular image is from the British Postal Museum. And the word philately. The word philately is the English version of the French word philatele, coined by Georges Herpin in 1864. Herpin started that stamps being collected and studied for the previous 6 or 7 years, and a better name was required for the new hobby than timbromania. Timbromania, which was disliked by most of the collectors, and the collector were known as timbre maniacs. Herpin took the Greek root word phil or philo, meaning an attraction or affinity for something, and atelia, meaning exempt from duties and taxes, to form philately, now which is coined as an English word philately. Basically, in those days, timbre maniacs, in fact, some of the earliest magazines mentions that the people used to be treated for collecting stamps, I believe, thinking that it is a madness because they started collecting stamp as a hobby. So they were called as timbre maniacs. Later on, the Herpin gave a new word, coined a new term called philately. Now, let us talk about the first stamp of India, British stamp of India. Even though, if you study the history of India, we had lot of postal systems with us starting from 17th century. Mark Wilkes writes in one of his books about the Mysore that during 1650, Chikkadevaraja Wadiyar, then Mysore king, used to have a local postal system called Mysore Anche. In his book, on the Mysore part, he talks highly about Chikkadevaraja Wadiyar and his communication system. Later, during the Tipu and Hyder period, Tipu and Hyder had their own messengers who used to carry the letters to Persia, France, and all that. They used to use the Silk Route. And during the first, second, third, and fourth Anglo-Mysore War, there used to be a lot of campaign mails. Campaign mails means the British army personnel who used to be stationed here used to correspond with their families or with their own officials. Those are called as campaign mails in general term. Okay. And those letters are even today highly sorted ones because they give the fact of that particular war and the outcomes and all that is being mentioned by the to the addressee by the letter writing person. So they were also in existence during 1780 to 1800. During 1790, Britishers appointed a engineer called Haviland, D. Haviland. Some of you, if you have studied a bit of history about Srirangapatna, he constructed the first bridge called Haviland Bridge. He used to correspond with his family starting from 1790 to 1820 when he was stationed in Mysore state at that point of time. And his correspondences he wrote close to 3,000 different letters to his family in that 30 years. And in those days, letter writing was an expensive affair. In one of the private collections with a private collector in Germany, the first letter what Mr. Haviland wrote during 1790 mentions that he paid almost 10 rupees as a postage to carry that letter from Bangalore to London through Silk Road. So this was pre-stamp era. And by 1850s, the East India Company had established a good postal network across three main presidencies, Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras, and other provinces. The method of charging the letters were through hand-struck postal franking. The Postal Reform Commission appointed in 1850 recommended total abolition of hand-struck postal franking system, and prepayment of postage by means of stamp should be obtained from London. The court directors in London, however, decided that these stamps should be printed in India, chiefly on the grounds of expense, because that has to be exported from London to India, which was a very tedious job at that point of time. So they decided to make in India concept in those days. Meanwhile, Sir Bartle Ferrare, the governor of Northwest Province of Sindh, introduces the Sindh Dock stamps in his province on 1st July 1852 for prepayment of postage and had a great degree of success. These stamps has distinction of being the first postage stamps of India as well as Asia, though this is not officially all India issue. The blue color stamp, what you see, is known as the half-anna blue half-anna stamp. This led to Captain H.L. Tullier, the Deputy Surveyor General, Calcutta, being commissioned to prepare the stamp designs for half-anna, 1 anna, 2 annas, and 4 anna stamps. Finally, on 1st October 1854, the half-anna blue lithograph stamps were issued in public use. This is the first stamp of British India, which was issued 170 years ago for the public use in India. Then comes the first aerial post of the world. On February 18, 1911, French pilot Henri Piquet carried the first official mail flown by airplane. The flight occurred in India. Piquet carried a sack with about 6,500 cards and letters on his Humber biplane. The plane flew a distance of 5 miles from an Allahabad polo field over the Yamuna River to a place called Naini. All mail received a special cachet, which you can see in the center, the first aerial post, UP exhibition, Allahabad. This is the cachet which all the mails received, and the pilot returned to the exhibition grounds after delivering the mail to the postal authorities in Naini, completing the journey in 27 minutes. The takeoff and landing back in landing at Naini and again taking off from Naini to coming back to Allahabad took about 27 minutes during 1911. Most of the mails have a magenta ink cancellation, but few cancellations exist with black ink. The Captain Windham is the man who designed the postmark, and he was credited as the idea and the man behind the first aerial post. Again, this is the contribution to the world by India. The first aerial post of the world is from India. And when it comes to the brief history of the rockets, brief history of the ancient rocket, the Chinese used them for display in Tang dynasty during 7th century to 10th century, and for the war against Mongols in the 13th century. The Italians used them as weapons before 1400. But the rocket was used during the war was during the Anglo-Mysore War during 1781 and 1792 and 99. Tipu routed the British with the rockets in an engagement around 1780 to 1799. By the time of the Napoleonic Wars, the rocket has been displaced by cannon. Although William Congreve started to develop the rocket, he took the technology from the Tipu rockets and he adds it up and he uses them in the Napoleon War. His rockets were responsible for burning the Boulogne and Copenhagen. His rockets routed American forces defending Washington and allowed the English to enter and burn it. After this 1799 or 1804, the Napoleon War, we have not heard much about the rockets. At least in India, everybody thought that the rocket concept, even if you go through some of the great books by APJ Kalam sir and other prominent dignitaries, they give credit to Tipu, and Tipu rockets were taken from Tanjavur local rocket, the what you call the local manufacturers of during the Deepavali, they used to prepare all these rockets and other things. From them, the Tipu learns the trick and he develops it and uses in the war. The conceptualization behind rocket mail is to expedite transportation and communication across mountain regions, flood affected areas, and during natural catastrophe. The earliest known mail transported through rockets took place quite frequently at the island of Nifo between Samoa and Fiji Islands in the Pacific Ocean. The island is one of the Tonga Islands in Polynesia. Each month, the state steamship Tofo of the Union Steamship Company of New Zealand made a stop at Nifo en route from the Samoa to the Fijis. New issues of a shallow reef prevented the steamer from approaching the shore. So they decide to send the letters through weather rockets. When letters were for the island were to be delivered, weather permitting, they were attracted to one of the regular signal rockets of the ship and were fired to shore. No similar return delivery has been reported. This method was not a very satisfactory, as sometimes letters were burned by the rocket or rockets with the letter were lost in the bush or it used to merge in the waters. But no flown cover from the early rocket delivery is known. Even though this has been recorded in earliest books, we have not seen any live example of the cover which are flown through those rockets. This was around 1900s. And the first well-documented rocket post experiments happened in Germany by Gerhard Zucker in 1933. I'll show you a small sketch diagram of a rocket. This happened during 28 July 1934, 33 or 34. This is from the book. The image is from the Postal History Museum, London, and the image source, I give a credit to Sri Gurubir Singh Ji, who has written a wonderful book, The Forgotten Pioneer. Now, let us talk about the rocket mails in India. Stephen Hector Smith, born in Assam, 1891, was a jack of all trades. He worked as a customs official, beginning of his career during 1911. And as a policeman, he joins Calcutta Police Force. Then he leaves that to study medicine and he becomes a dentist. Post his pass out from the Calcutta Medical College, he becomes a dentist and he works as a dentist during the First World War and up to Second World War. He continues his profession as a dentist, but his passion and association with British Interplanetary Society triggered him to venture about 270 plus rocket mail experiments between 1934 and 1944. He had many firsts to his credit in these experiments, including sending the livestock, medicines, food, etc. All his experiments were well documented. Unfortunate part of all these experiments was last 20 years of his life, which was tumultuous, and he ended up as a bankrupt. That was the very sad state of affairs during his lifetime. Even though he lived hardly 60 years, he was a jack of all many trades, and till 1964, we had no history of rockets in India, but this man to be credited for all the experiments which he has recorded, close to about 270 plus rocket experiments. Now I'm going to take you through all his experiments, at least about 30 to 40, which I have recorded at my personal capacity. When we are going to talk about the pioneer, Stephen H. Smith, I would like to quote, "For several years, we've been hearing from Russians the claim that they were the first to send into space by means of a rocket live animals. Witness is Sputnik 2 carrying the first space traveler, the dog called Laika. The United States joined the parade when in 1959, they set up a rocket carrying 2 small monkeys. But few know or realize, however, that male rocket experiments were carried out in the early 1930s by such pioneer rocketeers such as Frederick, Gerhard Zucker, Carl Roberti, and Stephen H. Smith. While these men were all contemporary, their experiments were primarily designed for the sole purpose of carrying mail in their various rocket experiments. This was originally also true in the case of Stephen H. Smith, because out of 270 experiments, he dedicates close to about 90 experiments solely for the transmission of mail, who conducted his experiments from his native country of India. But he had the foresight to realize early in his experiments the possibility of utilizing his rockets for purpose other than merely carrying mail. Smith rockets consisted typically of a tube constructed from a cardboard or a wood or a leather or a metal. The lower section would hold the powder cartridge or cartridges from the commercial providers, and the upper section or a compartment contained the payload of livestock, food, medicine, or mail. He experimented with that he called telescopic rockets, where he could vary the length of the section of the rocket and the rocket train, where the rocket had multiple sections. All these rockets were manufactured majorly by Masons, the Orient Fireworks Company of Calcutta, and very few he obtained from Messrs. James Paine and Sons, London. Now we are going to talk about the first rocket mail of India. He chooses a place called Saugar Island to experiment his first rocket mail. This place from Calcutta is about 150 kilometers away, which was a seashore. And to reach in normal condition in 1930s, it used to take 5 days. And if the weather is bad, it used to take roughly around 5 to 10 days. Okay. And the first experiment of Indian rocket mail, he did it on 30th September 1934. I'm going to read out a gist about the first rocket mail. The first Indian rocket mail experiment had taken place at sea from ship to shore off Saugar Island on 30th September 1934. The rocket used was locally manufactured by the first of the Orient Fireworks Company of Calcutta. The fuse of the rocket was ignited by Mr. Charles Porten, the captain of the dispatch vessel Pansy, without success, the first one. As his second effort failed, the chief officer of the ship, Mr. E.T. Day, tried his hand at igniting the fuse, but he also failed, which led Mr. S.E. Woolman, the chief engineer, to try again with no success. Finally, the experimenter, none other than Stephen Smith, was himself successful in igniting the fuse of the rocket. which rose and burst in mid-air. It carried 143 letters, which owing to the mid-air burst scattered in the many directions. 140 letters were saved and 3 were lost. The salvaged letters were handed over to Mr. Shenton, the lighthouse keeper of Saugar Island, who cancelled the letters with a postmark, Saugar Island postmark, 30th September 1934 on both sides. The flown cover have a vignette. Vignette means a small label which you can see on the cover, okay, is in green and red affixed on them and have a single line strike of first firing, ship to shore, cachet in violet. You can see a diagonal postmark. On the verso means the backside. The cover is autographed by Stephen Smith. The envelope bears rocket fee of ₹2, and the notes which he maintains says notes on the rocket firing 30th September 1934, time about 3:30 p.m., place at the sea of Saugar Island, direct fired from south to north, directions fired, distance covered is about 100 feet in mid-air, flown covers 143, 3 lost and 140 recovered. Remarks: rocket burst in the mid-air and away from Pansy. Pansy was the cabinet which was carrying the letter. Similarly, this is a second experiment number. He used to maintain a record, and I'm going to talk about the rocket number 10, which was experimented on 4th October 1934. Again, this was ship-to-shore firing at Diamond Harbor. The rocket used for this firing was manufactured by Orient Fireworks Company, and only 75 letters were carried. Rocket was fired from the Hilsa fishing boat from about a distance of 73 yards away from the shore. The mail has reached the shore successfully, but from the experimenter point of view, it was extremely unsuccessful as the rocket burst and the mail was not delivered as it should have been. Again, on the notes on the rocket firing, he mentions the distance covered about 73 yards. And again, in the remarks, he mentions it, rocket reached the land but burst and was off the target. Now we are going to talk about the experiments 11, 12, and 13, which was done during 16 December 1934. This was, the rocket was manufactured by James Payne and Sons in London and were launched from a collapsible starting station in a boat off Saugar Island in violent waves. The rocket number 11 did not carry any letters. Each rocket carried 110 miniature pages of the newspaper, The Statesman, in special envelopes. The covers also bears a black and white vignette portraying a night scene consisting of rocket, 2 bats, and the moon. You can see a small black color vignette which he describes what it carries karke. This was the newspaper which that particular rocket carried. Miniature copy of The Statesman carried by the rocket, signed by Stephen Smith and endorsed by Rocket Mail. This is the vignette which you can see in a bigger image, where you can see 2 bats and rocket flying in the night. And this is the rocket number 24, experiment number 24, the Calcutta Press rocket firing. At the request of the Calcutta Press, a special rocket experiment was conducted at Dokoria on 27th February 1935. 3 rockets were prepared. One was a small one, while the other 2 were big ones, with its cartridge weighing 14 pounds each. First, the small rocket containing 130 covers were dispatched. Rocket shot off beautifully and burst in the mid-air about 250 yards away, resulting all 130 covers scattering and fluttering to the ground. The second rocket, on being fired, gave a hot sparks to such an extent that it melted the racks. The 130 covers carried by the first rocket bear a maroon vignette with suitable black inscription. This label tied down to the cover by the impresse of reddish violet rocket. The postmark on the cover read Park Street, 27th February 1935. And you can see a small piece onto the right of the cover, which says, a piece from my rocket, he mentions, which was tested on 27th October 1935. When the rocket bursted in midair, he has collected that rocket piece and he made it as a memorabilia gift. And that's a small piece for you. And these all are commercial rocket firings. To commemorate a special event, the Royal Silver Jubilee rocket firing, which took place off Diamond Harbour on the 23rd March 1935, was a ship-to-shore experiment. 2 rockets were manufactured by Orient Fireworks of Calcutta. The rockets on firing landed almost into a tank which was hidden on shore by a cluster of bushes. Hence, a few covers were stained with the muddy water. 200 covers carried and 100 each on either rocket. So this was to commemorate a particular event, the Royal Silver Jubilee. So he used to make even commercial rocket firings. This is an example for Stephen Smith's vision that it can be used for some special, to commemorate special occasions. This is again another commercial rocket firing. It was left to Sikkim, a small state nestling among the eastern Himalayas, to carry out the first official rocket experiments, not only for using the rocket as a means of conveying mails across difficult places, but also for the purpose of transporting small parcels. This progressive little mountain state has also earned a distinction of being the first country in the world to successfully dispatch by means of a rocket a parcel containing small quantities of such as medicines, tobacco, tea, sugar, etc. First firing on 7th April 1935 happened from Gangtok Post Office compound to the Darbar High School. And in Sikkim, the king invites Stephen Smith to conduct these kind of experiments. And in his lifetime, he conducts close to about 40 experiments carrying various useful items through rockets to the hilly region. Then he releases a rocketogram. This is for raising funds for the flood hit areas or earthquake relief fund. This was for Quetta Earthquake Relief Fund. 2 rocket transport experiments were conducted over Roopnarayan River on 6th June 1935. 2 rockets were fired from Kolghat bank of river Roopnarayan to the Deluthi bank, a rough estimate of distance being 1,000 yards. The rocket to be fired was number 60. This rocket contained a packet of uncooked gram and other packets of rice, salt, turmeric, cloves, and a bundle of berries, beside 100 specially printed missiving furnishing details as to contents of the rocket. The entire proceeds of the sale of the rocket vignettes and flown missive were handed over to the private secretary to His Excellency, the Viceroy, in charge of the fund. You can see the front and the back of the rocketgram. In the back of the thing, he clearly mentions what that rocket container or the cabinet contained. It contained 1 packet of gram, 1 packet of rice, salt, turmeric, chilies, cloves, berries, and 150 such messages, and he signs it off. The distance covered was close to about 900 yards. This was for the rocket number 61. This was for Red Cross Fund. Immediately following the firing of rocket number 60, the experiment placed the rocket number 61 on the firing rack and dispatched it across the river. The rocket number 61 was loaded with packets of lint and Epsom salts, and small bottles of iodine, leucosprin, haliverol, and 2 rolls of bandages, besides 110 yellow missives. The proceeds received from the sale, missives, and vignettes were forwarded to the relief fund. Here also, at the back of each letter, he mentions what that particular rocket cabinet carried. And this was the life-turning event where he dispatches the livestock through his rocket number 65. The world's first rocket transport of life was effected on 29 June 1935. Much more before the Sputnik 2 took off. Okay, about around 20 years prior to that, he does this experiment. When rocket number 65, the David Ezra, was dispatched out of the river Damodar from the Damodar bank to the Ramkanali bank, carrying a cock and a hen and about 189 specially printed missives. Stephen Smith, in his remarks, states, sheer luck with a special capital L. The wind and the soft sand helped me. These were, in my opinion, the greatest factors to the birds being alive. When the rockets landed, the livestock were alive. So the total distance was about 800 to 850 yards. Remarks, managed to cross the river and successfully, and livestock were alive after the firing. This is again a food parcel rocket experiment. The rocket number 66. Shortly after the completion of the livestock firing on 29 June, rocket number 69, carrying a small parcel of bread, butter, packets of oral and dicol-phos tablets, and about 160 postal mails, was successfully over the river Damodar. In this, he claims the distance covered was about 300 yards and remarks the rocket accidentally got ignited. It almost laid out, flew round in circles till getting caught in a stiff upper current, dashed off 300 yards away. And this was to commemorate a Scouts Jamboree in Delhi. He was invited by then Scouts General to conduct an experiment. In February 1937, an All India Boys and Scouts Jamboree was held, and Stephen H. Smith was invited to demonstrate his rocket experiments at this camp, which he did on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd February 1937. On first day, Smith fired 3 propaganda rockets carrying various leaflets and 2,500 messages of loyalty printed in red from the Indian Scouts and addressed to the late Emperor of India, King George VI, and to Her Majesty Elizabeth. All the propaganda leaflets, messages of loyalty, and the letter bear a special circular dispatch gadget. And this was again for the Scouts Jamboree. The rocket was named after his Manasa Guru called Dr. Robert Pagnani, who was a Swiss person. On 1st February, 4 rockets firing took place from the Jamboree camp, 3 being propaganda rockets, while the 4th carried the mail. The mail rocket number 134, Dr. R. Pagnani, named after the Swiss airmail collector, Dr. Robert Pagnani, carried 87 covers. And here he doesn't mention the distance covered, but rocket was named after, he mentions only in the remarks, it was named after his guru, Robert Pagnani. This was to commemorate the coronation of the George VI. Immediately after the pilot rocket number P9 was successfully fired, the second rocket, named Coronation Rocket number 141, was fired, carrying 400 loyalty cards, each bearing a special coronation vignette, out of which 350 were posted and franked with postage stamp. The balance 50 numbers could not be posted as the post office was closed for the coronation day and Stephen Smith ran short of postage stamps. So totally this particular rocket covers about a half a mile and it carries about 400 carts. Rocket shot off beautifully, landing half a mile away. It was a successful landing. And this was again for a cause which was for a flood affected area. A large flooded area at Muktapur gave Stephen Smith the opportunity to demonstrate with rockets. He shot the telescopic rocket number 126 with lentils, rice, chilies from Muktapur to Dhapa over a large flooded area. These telescopic rockets can be lengthened or reduced in size without any further additional or material than in original construction. The advantage of this type of rocket lies in the fact that there is no fixed amount of space according to the size and quantity of the articles to be transported. In the Star of India newspaper, Flight Over the Floods, she carried 80 items for the postage, besides several articles including dal, rice, chilies suitable for the destitute of a flooded area cut off from the mainland. So this was on the 9th June 1936. Place Muktapur to Daba. Distance covered, he has not recorded. Flown covers 80 along with all those food items. And this was also a successful landing. World's first rocket flood rocket firing. And again, he comes back to the livestock. During September 1936, the second flood rocket firing, the John Winton rocket number 127, one of Mr. Stephen Smith's latest type of telescopic rockets, made a very successful flight. John Winterton, which was built of 3 different compartments besides the magazine's chamber, had the unique distinction of carrying a live snake, an apple, and a packet of mail. So he chose snake to transport through rocket. In the notes he mentions this was on 22nd September 1936. Time not known. He has not mentioned. Place from Chingripota to Malika Port. Distance covered not recorded. First telescopic rocket which carried a snake, he mentions. This was the image of the telescopic rocket. An old fancy crystallized into a fact this morning at Behla when the world's first rocket train measuring 7 feet 2 inches was made its first flight, and surprisingly successful flight considering the variety of articles carried. A pilot rocket train, the Ericsson, consisting of 3 compartments carrying only 300 postcards, was fired by Mr. Johnny Sukias, one of the photographers present. The control and the parcel cabin of the Ericsson broke away from the rest of the train in the midair after a short flight of 250 yards. So he mentions at the back what all those compartments carried. Then comes the rocketgram. In this, he mentions the rocket train aptly christened the Saturn Express. Herbert E. Barber consisted of 4 compartments, the first being the control and the parcel cabin. Immediately following came the passenger saloon, then followed the dining car, and the last the mail van. All 4 compartments were rigidly connected to one another to obviate wind resistance. And here in the first parcel van, what it carried, he mentions it. In the second passenger saloon, he mentions the content. And third, the dining car, which again, he supplied the food material. He mentions them. And the fourth one was the mail van. So he mentions about 200 postcards were part of that particular experiment. Notes on the rocket firing. Date 22nd September 1937. Place Behla. Distance covered about 600 yards. Flown covers 300 cards. Remarks. World's first rocket train measuring 7 feet 2 inches made its first flight, and surprisingly successful flight considering the variety of articles it carried. Faye Haycourt bookkeeping. Faye Haycourt was married to Stephen Smith, and in November 1918, Stephen Smith was married to Faye Harcourt. As far as Faye was concerned, she saved covers signed by the pioneer pilots and must have accumulated a most interesting collection, as we might reasonably assume Stephen Smith would present his with a cover from the important flights. Faye used to do bookkeeping for Stephen Smith, recording all his rocket firings in a ledger sheet. A typical ledger sheet of such recording of March 2nd, 1937 for the rocket fired at Alipur, Calcutta is given above. In this, he used to mention the manufacturer name and what it carried and all the remarks with how it landed and all that. At the back, he used to do the self-hand-drawn sketches that where he failed or how he failed and how to rectify those mistakes and all that. I'm going to show you in the concurrent slides about his sketches. You can see the image of the rocket number 84 from the Gangtok Telegraph Office with 155 missives and one live cock bird. This particular rocket carried His Highness the Maharaja just prior to the firing of the rocket. His Highness the Maharaja of Sikkim about to fire a rocket. These are the two images which was in my collection earlier. And he was also very meticulous when it comes to the documentation of all his experiments. Stephen Smith used to carry a photographer along with him for all the experiments to take the photographs of the entire experiments. At the same time, he used to give all his experiments in a detailed letter to various newspapers. And he used to ensure that it gets published also. You can see a small cutout dated September 22nd, 1937, Star of India newspaper, where that particular news item talks about rocket train flight, the forerunner of future aerial travel. And it's a detailed article of those times. And at the same time, he was a visionary. Here you can see the rocket experiments and the souvenirs. Stephen Smith used to collect the rocket wrappers, outer coverings, in his own words, the skin of the rocket, as souvenirs. Smith also collected the feathers of the livestock, birds transported on the rocket, and also similar flown items. He then used to mount them on a thick card and sign them as usual to present it to his friends interested and supported him for his rocket mail experiments as written gift or a written souvenir. So you can see the three different rocket dispatches and the skin of the rocket. And he used to affix them and sign it across. And he used to mention a piece of the skin of my rocket mail number 1, and he used to sign it. Similarly, you can see rocket number 4 and various other ones. During his lifetime, he wrote 5 books and produced 8 more that were never published. His personal collection was dispersed in India and beyond. At the end of this presentation, I'm going to show you all the published works which are in my personal library. The first work was 1926, Indian Airways, Part 1. In 1927, he published the second book called Indian Airways, Part 2. In 1927, again, he produced a small booklet called World's Flyers Danger Zone, where one of his friend, Elliot, dies in that plane crash. To raise funds for his family, he produces that small booklet, which is one of the most scarcest books in today's times. And in 1930, he produces the 4th book, Indian Airways Part 3. And in 1943, he produces a rocket mail catalog and historical survey of first experiments in rocketry. This issue was republished with updation after Smith's death in 1951. It was authorized by his widow and edited by Max and J. Dellenbach. This was reissued during 1953. The following are not published: details of flight, chiefly illustrations, aviation and what steps Indian government is taking on this matter, India Airways 100 years ago, where he talks about I believe in this particular book, during 1940s, he talks about some of the flights starting from our Jatayu, the Ramayana, all that. Then he brings it to the new age experiments, what he did. The fourth book, unpublished, was Rocket Transport in India, Queer Birds of Aerophilately, Rocketograms, Early Balloon Ascents in India, Indian Rocket Experiments, 1938. These 8 books were unpublished, and I believe all these manuscripts were available till late 1980s with his widow, and afterwards it has been scattered with various collectors, or maybe it must have gone into dust. A small he used to write frequently to various magazines and books on his experiments. And here I'm going to read about one of the editorials of his Rocket Mail book, where he says, destruction tests. He begins with a note: experience, the name men give to their mistakes. A very famous quote by Oscar Wilde. In the first adventures of an invention, there is always a time when the only course is to act and then see what happens. The data obtained from breakages and mishaps are invaluable. In the case of an engine builder, every plant destroyed on test, every year of analysis of failures is one step nearer to complete reliability. Science does not represent absolute truth. Science can only give information about matter and phenomena as far as all these have been explored. Up to the present day, rocket transport has been explored very little. The next century's scientific research may bring knowledge that will entirely upset the science of today due to the mistakes of present day rocket experimenters. Facts are slowly accumulating, which will be infinite advantage to the future investigator, whose mind is capable of rising above the prejudice which at the moment characterize the different schools of thought which destruct each other facts, forgetting that there must be some underlying principles which will harmonize these facts and reconcile many seeming inconsistencies. This was an editorial which he wrote in 1953. And if you see the last but one paragraph where he mentions the next century's scientific research may bring knowledge that will entirely upset the science of today, is very, very, very apt for in today's context. And when you go through his diary pages, as I mentioned earlier, for every experiment, he used to write about his success as well as about his failures. So in the first diagram, you can see this was the sketch of the flight of rocket number 16, where he mentions this was on the island where you can see a lighthouse where he fires and it goes about 82 yards and it crash lands. Similarly, he talks about rocket number 18 reaching the destination, which was successful. Again, rocket number 19, which was again a successful landing. And rocket number 20, he mentions why most of the faulty, why. Then he writes, must be because of faulty packaging that it crash landed. Then again, one more diary page where he mentions, if you read the remark, gave a lot of trouble to ignite. Then when it did ignite, the red thing burst almost immediately, burnt my right hand. And he mentions the image, what happened, and people getting scattered when the rocket burst at the site. And as we come to an end stage, the Department of Post commemorated Stephen Smith. Stephen Hector Taylor Smith, the father of Indian aerophilately, commonly known as Stephen Smith, was born on 14th February 1891 at Strawberry Hill, Shillong, Assam. Smith was a pioneer of aerophilately and made several experiments with various types of balloon mail, rocket mail, air mail, etc. Even as a boy, along with other schoolmates, Smith attempted to transport liver garden lizards as rockets over the swimming pool of St. Patrick's School, Asansol. Unfortunately, only one rocket rose up in the air and the burst, killing the lizards tied to it. Smith was the first rocket experimenter to convey successfully in one of his rocket parcels of foodstuff, medicine, and livestock. Smith established the Indian Airmail Society in Calcutta in 1924, became member of the philatelic societies in UK, Europe, and USA, joined British Interplanetary Society in late 1934. Stephen Smith died on 15th February 1951 and now immortalized as the father of aerophilately in India. The Department of Post deems it privilege to issue a stamp on highly respected pioneer of airborne mail. The last 4 or 5 years, starting from 48 to 51, literally, he used to, some of my senior collectors used to mention me that he used to beg for alms sitting in the street, Elliott Street to Park Street. He used to always roam asking for alms, and whoever pays him some money, he used to give a small token of souvenirs of his experiments, the rocket experiments. That was the case of Stephen Smith. Unfortunately, his Manasa Guru, whom he never met in person, Robert Pagnani, dies during November 1950 or December 1950, 2 months before Smith died. And in his will, Robert Pagnani gives 25% of the share to Stephen Smith. And after his death, by the time that will copy and the money, which was close to about 40,000 Swiss francs of 1950s, Smith was no more. The beneficiary was his family. And in one of the letters to Pagnani, Stephen Smith writes, "Life is a comedy to him who thinks and tragedy to him who feels." So he was going through a very difficult times in those days. And he also writes in one of the letters to Dr. Robert Pagnani that profit in his own land is not respected. So that's it from my side. If you want to know more about philately or all these philatelic experiments, the Karnataka Philatelic Society meets on every first Sunday of the month at Bangalore GPO between 10:30 and 12 noon. You can join, and post this, I'm open for the question and answer session. Before to that, I would like to show all the books which has been published by him and the reference books what I have at my place. And I would like to end this presentation with a Albert Einstein quote: "The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know so much." Okay, thank you very much. And at this point of time, I would like to thank Creactive and Srinath sir for giving me an opportunity to make this small presentation on Rocket Mails of India. And I'll stop sharing now. Now I'm going to show you a few books which has been published by Stephen Smith during the 1930s. These are the Indian Airways, all the 3 volumes. And this is the most scarce book, which talks about World Flyers Danger Zone, which was published in 1927. Apart from that, he's been credited even in NASA Journal, essays on history of rocketry and astronautics, proceedings of the 3rd through the 6th History Symposia of the International Academy of Astronautics, which happened in 1969. There is a mention about Stephen Smith, even by NASA in their publication. And other than that, there is a book which was issued during 1980 by Philatelic Congress of India, which is called as From the Diary of Stephen Smith. And this was the catalog which he issued during 1943, Rocket Mail catalog, where he mentions the catalog and the historical survey of the first experiments in rocketry. He mentions about that. All his Rocket Mail is in now private hands, except the things which he wrote to his guru, Robert Paganini. Those are in the archives of the Swiss Postal History Museum. All his correspondences with Dr. Robert Paganini are available for the ready references, wherein he mentions about all his 270 plus experiments. Every experiment he used to write to Robert Paganini, explaining what he did, what went wrong, what went right, and all that. The Rocket Mail examples, I'll show you few of the Rocket Mail examples which are in my collection. This is one catalog issued during 1940s, and this is the 1953 republished book of Rocket Mails. Other than that, this is the book, the stamp issued during 1992. To commemorate that, the Department of Post has issued a small booklet on Stephen Smith. And as a ready reference, or the wonderful work has been done by Sri Gurubir Singh of British Interplanetary Society. He has published a almost close to about 200 odd pages book on India's forgotten rocket pioneer, Stephen Smith. This is available in Amazon. Those who want, they can purchase this book. This is another wonderful book giving the entire glimpses of Stephen Smith. In fact, he started before Rocket Mails. He starts experimenting with the air mail and also the pigeon mail. During 1930s, he homes around 42 pigeons just to send mails through pigeon. So those experiments also has been mentioned in this book. Wonderful book to read. It is available on Amazon. That's it from my side. If anybody has any questions, queries, I'm open for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramu sir. It's a very interesting and very
Sorry,
informative.
I took almost about an hour.
It's okay, but it's a very informative, sir. Huge information. Any questions, you can unmute and ask the questions. So,
Ramu sir,
Thank you,
I'm
sir.
really grateful to you and I'm very thankful to you for accepting our invitation. It was attention-keeping talk. Even many things people should know. That's what your attempt you have been doing. I know how much difficult it would be to collect such a mammoth valuable and precious information. By looking at the books and the status of book, we can understand the value of those books. Hats off to your job. I have a small question.
हाँ
During
सर,
your presentation, which you are mentioning about the two companies, one is Calcutta
Orient,
based,
Orient Rocket.
another is a London based.
हाँ सर.
How long did they function, or still the company is active, or what is the state of?
I went in search of Orient in Calcutta, but I couldn't get any information. But in London, the James Pan is still active, sir.
Second question is about, do you have any rocket model somewhere else or with you or in the archives which he was using? How was it looking?
It is
Because
available in the Sikkim museum, sir.
thank you so much, and looking forward to you for
This
your.
is one of the rocket mail which he flew,
thank you.
and this is the one of the one. And every rocket mails he used to sign as a certificate of authenticity. Okay, he had a very long vision where these things will become one day a tangible asset or an investment of point of view. And he used to maintain every experiment a photograph, and he used to write about the experiment in his own handwriting. And he used to keep one beautiful thing where he used to put the cutout of the newspaper which appeared, the news item and all that. At the same time, he used to issue small brochures why he is doing those experiments, so that people should know about his experiments. So he used to maintain those small brochures also.
Very nice, sir. Thank you so much. Hopefully, people also should start investigating Tippu Haidar era rockets people are doing, which we are also seeing in many of the talks. Even before Tippu Haidar era, also there are certain facts saying that during the Mysore Wadayar period itself, this started. But good to know that this type of a historical thing. Thank you so much.
Sir, even for the Tippu thing, I have read in one of my books that he got it from Tanjavur experiment. During Diwali and other times, they used to do these experiments. He got it from them. Karke, one of the 19th century book mentions about it.
It is possible. Tippu Haidar period is 40 years. Within 40 years, any technology cannot evolve into such a bigger thing. There could be pre-Tippu Haidar history of rockets also. People should explore and make it available. Thank
Even
you
in
for
Bangalore, if you remember, we had near Sadar Patrapa Road a place called Tara Mandalapete.
Yeah.
Now that rocket launch, that stone, everything is gone, I think. Somebody had documented a small documentary that particular stone was used to launch rockets. And I have as earlier it was mentioned, I'm a bibliographer also. At the same time, I have a bibliophily. That means collecting books as my passion. My first book in my collection dates back to 1792, almost 232 years back, which talks about the Bangalore and the beginning of the Bangalore, where a draftsman by name Home comes from UK on behest of Cornwallis, and he records the Bangalore map, Seringapatnam map, and he mentions in the map the French camp, which is called as French Rocks, the current Pandavpura, and he mentions there they used to do the rocket experiments.
Thank you so much, sir. Over to others. Many people may have a question. So
Thank
please.
you. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. I think no questions. We are running out of the time. Okay. So thank you very much for
Anybody
sharing.
wants to know anything, ma'am, I have forwarded you that small AV, which you can share.
Yes, I posted in chat box. Please copy that link, YouTube link, and watch it. Sir has sent one AV of his work.
Rocket mails.
Rocket mails. Okay. So thank you very much for sharing your invaluable insight on the fascinating topic. Thank you for enriching our understanding and inspiring us to explore more. Thank you. Thank you one and all for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.